Disclaimer. The 24 Shades of Blue Cold Case Edition series is about real ongoing homicide investigations. The following conversation may be disturbing to some people and is not recommended for all ages. Please take a moment and decide if you would like to continue listening or watching. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello, everybody. Welcome to 24 Shades of Blue Cold Case Edition. I'm your host of the series, Andy O'Brien. Our second cold case we're going to be discussing is the case of Cassandra Doe. Today, I have the pleasure, again, of being with Toronto Police's lead homicide detective, Steve Smith. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Andy.
Today's case, Cassandra Doe, what were the last moments mapped out of Cassandra's life?
Can't even imagine what Cassandra was going through at the time. Obviously, she was alone in her apartment, and she would have had a very large man, most likely on top of her, with his hands around her neck, choking the life out of her. She must have known at that point that she may not survive this. I can't even imagine what was going through her head.
A horrible incident, and once again, the whole point of this show and us teaming up is to bring some closure for the family and find this individual who did this. When I look at the pictures here that you provided, we have the bathtub in that Cassandra was found. This is the space, I guess, her apartment, and this individual, there is a DNA profile that matches a prior assault. Can we talk a little bit about what the first assault was?
Absolutely. The first assault was our offender called and attended a brothel. He was looking for a sex trade worker. He actually named a sex trade worker that he was looking for. He attended this address, again, right in the same area, a little bit north of where Cassandra was found. When he arrived, the worker he was looking for wasn't there, but there was another sex trade worker in the apartment. And at that point, he proceeded to sexually assault her. He pulled out some handcuffs and was going to bind her, but she was able to fight her way and escape, lock herself in the bathroom, and able to call police, at which point he fled. But he did leave his DNA behind from the sexual assault.
So that very well, had that person not escaped, I think it's safe to say that person may have met their demise as well. We don't know, but it's possible.
There's a very good likelihood of that. I mean, judging by his future murder that he committed, there was a good chance that person survived by her actions at that time.
So let's talk about how did this murder unfold? What do you think happened?
Cassandra, she was a transgender sex trade worker. She advertised both on the internet as well as in the newspapers at the time. She made no bones about the fact that she was transgender. So we aren't thinking that this was something mistaken that the offender came to the apartment thinking. So what we believe happened is he had saw the ads. Whatever was in his mind at that time, whether he was going to go and pay for sex, whether he was going to go and sexually assault Cassandra, or whether he went there with the intent of murder, I guess we'll never know unless we actually find the person and he tells us. But he made a phone call to her and set up an actual time for her date. So she'd set up, she was ready for him. But one thing about Cassandra is she was very discerning on her clients. So she would vet the clients. If she knew them before, she only had a standard list that she would, usually if she was bringing someone new in, she would vet that person. So we're believing that this person was very articulate in the way that he spoke to her, that he was able to talk her into actually seeing him for the first time. Now, when he showed up, we don't know what happened from there. We don't know if she decided that she didn't like the feeling of this person, whether he did something to put her on edge. But we believe that he forced his way in, and eventually he ended up murdering her, sexually assaulting her and murdering her.
And what do we know about the perpetrator?
We know both because we've done phenotyping as well as the fact that we do have a live victim. She was able to describe the offender. She described him as a black male and very large. She said like overly large. She was saying, 6'5", 6'6", 230 pounds. So a very, very large man, and that he had access to handcuffs, that he had handcuffs with him. So we're not sure if he would have used those in a job, or maybe he had purchased the handcuffs and he was bringing them specifically for binding devices. We don't really know that.
Okay. And I think, do we have an idea when let's talk about the location and when.
So it was 2003, August 25th, when Cassandra was murdered. The area is up on Gloucester Street, in the area between Gloucester and Church area. And the first assault was up around Jarvis and Bloor area. So all in the same area, all in the downtown, the north end of downtown, just south of Bloor, and both in the same area. I don't know much else to tell you about that. It's just interesting that both the cases are linked.
And time wise, it was 2003, correct?
It was 2003, yeah. And the sexual assault was actually from 1997.
Okay, so this is in the same period. So this person may have, hard to say, once again, speculation, did this person live down there? Did they just come back in as a predator into that area? It's very hard to say. What do you think? Do you think the person lived down and around the area, or do you think they just frequented there?
Our initial thought was that maybe he worked down in that area, may have lived elsewhere, but he very well could have lived in that area as well. I mean, that would be, we would think that someone from the area would have been able to identify him, maybe say, this is the person that could have committed these offenses, but it could be anything, right? This person could have been living by otherwise a normal life. He could have been working. He could have had a family. We just don't know. We don't know what was going through his head when he committed these offenses.
Yeah, because with the last assault, it seemed like they just escaped. They were lucky to get out of there.
Absolutely.
And then, I guess the question is, in a building like that, it was a low-rise building we talked about. So low-rise building, what time approximately was it?
Well, the date was set up for about 4:30 that evening.
4:30 p.m.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Cassandra had one of her relatives living with her, and he would leave during the dates. And usually the dates were half an hour to an hour, and then she would call him and he would come back to her apartment.
Yeah.
He wasn't called. He waited a few hours to give her some time in case something else was going on. He knew she had a further date that evening set up as well.
Okay.
So eventually in the evening they went back, but we believe that she was probably killed in that time frame, in and around 4:30 in the afternoon when the date showed up.
So 4:30, you have somebody that's noticeable, that doesn't really blend in. You're 6'6", no matter what color you are. 6'6", 230 pounds. You're a big dude. You're walking in somewhere. There was no cameras in this building at that time for some reason. Nowadays, he would probably be caught reasonably quickly. But you guys interviewed probably a lot of people in that building, I would assume. And nobody saw anybody of this description in the elevator with them, waiting for an elevator, coming back down, walking by them. Was there security in the building?
No, there was no security.
But nobody recalled this individual, this, linebacker from the Buffalo Bills walking in and out, and nobody recalled seeing this person.
Yeah, unfortunately not. I'm with you. If someone that's 6'6", 6'5", they're noticeable. Like, you notice that this is a big individual.
Especially when, you hear about a murder in your building and you walk by this individual, you may not have thought anything of it at the time, but then, that kind of a description is put out, and no one has ever called you.
No, nobody's ever come forward on that. And hopefully with this podcast, that someone's listening, and it may tweak them to be like, you know what? I lived in that building at that time, and I did see that individual in there. Whether it was once, whether it was twice, we don't know. But he was in that building, and I remember this person, if they could tell us anything about him.
100%. This is how we're going to solve these cold cases, by people coming forward,
That's right.
And I think the other question, and you and I were talking about this before the show, are these coincidences, these two cases? Is this a repeat offender? Is this a serial rapist or sexual assault? An individual that commits sexual assaults? Is this, obviously speculation when you look at, is this his first murder? Is there other murders that this individual has committed here or elsewhere? Who knows if he's even here or another country or even alive? It's hard to tell. But what's the coincidence, with this being the last you've heard of this individual? What do you think's happened to this person?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, right? I mean, you commit two offenses like this, you would think that this person has committed another offense. But obviously, we've ran this through our national data bank. This person hasn't been convicted of an offense where his DNA, he was required to provide his DNA, at least in Canada. We've sent this DNA through foreign countries as well, just to make sure, like you were saying, in case he had went to a different country.
Yeah.
We ran it through other databases. We have no hits on this DNA. So we're not sure, did this person completely change his lifestyle? I mean, it is possible. As I've told you before, we have 42 cases where we believe we have the offender's DNA and we have no hits on our national data bank.
Yeah.
So when you actually, I mean, none of us would ever know this, but if you actually take another person's life, is that enough to scare you straight if you're not a complete psychopath? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's what we discussed. I mean, and you know, if you have, and like, you know, other cases that I've talked to, you know, around different associations, you know, are these people aware now that if they screw up, if they do commit a crime and their DNA is taken, has it scared them? You know, has it, like you said, has it scared them completely straight? Unless you're a, you know, a Bernardo or one of these guys that, you know, that doesn't really have a conscience. You know, I wonder if that's the case.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I'm sure that there's a large number of people that are out there that are worried their past is going to come back to haunt them because, as we said, I mean, in the 80s and early 90s, people were leaving their DNA all over at crime scenes because really it wasn't a thing.
It was irrelevant.
Right?
It didn't matter.
So, but now they're living a different life, or they're living in a different country, or whatever they're doing. In the back of their head, they have to be knowing that they were at this scene and that they left their DNA there. And especially with the advent of genetic genealogy, these people, they can't be living a peaceful life. I'll tell you that, because at any point there could be a knock on their door and it's, hey, you're gonna stand trial for what you did back in the 80s or the 90s.
Yeah. And I wonder too, you know, a lot of these cases, whether it's in a, you know, a holding tank or someone's been somewhere, a lot of these people talk about it with other people. In your experience, what's the likelihood of somebody telling somebody?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that we rely on. We believe that in all these cases that somebody else knows. We don't believe that there's any case, and I mean, obviously there's an outlier in any case, but we believe that somebody knows who the killer is on every single one of these cases. In this case, we actually know that there's somebody that knows and they don't want to come forward. We've tried to interview them. They've refused to provide us information. We know that that person knows, and we're appealing to them as well as anybody else to just provide us this name. Again, we aren't looking for witnesses. We're looking for a name of the offender, and we'll do the investigation and we'll bring this person before justice.
And, you know, I think there's a common, we see it all the time in a lot of these murders. Strangulation seems to be, you know, a similarity with quite a few of the female sex workers. Why is that? And is that standard, do you think, or you just hear about it all the time as the most common?
Well, I mean, it would be speculation on my part, but I mean, I believe that if you're looking to sexually assault a sex trade worker, you're probably going to hold her down. He's probably going to get on top of her. And at that point, in their twisted mind, the next logical thing is to just put their hands around their throat, right? They're already on top of her. They're already dominating her. Now they're going to humiliate her by choking her last breath out of her during a sexual assault. I mean, there couldn't be anything more horrific than those two events.
Yeah. And also too, I think it plays into, you know, less DNA potentially. It would be probably obviously quieter than shooting somebody, or potentially, you know, stabbing or other means where someone could still scream. So I think probably a lot of those play into each other, I would imagine.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously we've had, or we have cases where people have been sexually assaulted and stabbed, sexually assaulted and strangled. So there's no hard and fast rule, but we believe that the domination lends itself to that, lends itself to the the ease of choking someone at that point.
And so I think, she was also known. So Cassandra was also known as Tula, and used to use a website to book her clients. Tell us a little bit about the website. What do we know about the website? What the name, is there any information that people would typically put? And also, do we know anything about the individual posting or calling specific websites or phone lines?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was basically just a web page, and it was developed for the sex trade workers in the community to use. There was a number of people that posted online. It was directed specifically to a certain community. They were able to provide pictures. The workers were able to provide pictures online, so that possible clients could look and decide who they wanted to attend with. But what Cassandra did was provide her home number. So it was basically no contact through the web page. It was basically her number was there. Someone would call her from a pay phone, set up a date, and then they would come buzz her from downstairs, which would ring her home phone. I mean, these days you probably wouldn't even have a home phone, right? Everything would be tracked through a cell phone, which would give us more evidence. But unfortunately, she was utilizing her home phone at the time.
And so, once again, something else you brought up that sounds like you could definitely hold a lot of weight to it is, this person didn't maybe identify everything about themselves. They got to the door. She said no. And that person, like you said yes. And then it went really bad really quickly.
Yeah, that is a possibility. I mean, like you said, Cassandra was, by all accounts, very discerning in the clients that she allowed into her apartment. She had a standard list of clients that she allowed. She very rarely went off that list. So this person must have talked his way at least to her door. And what happened at that point, we don't know. Maybe she looked and was like, whoa, this is a mountain of a man. I don't know if I want to be alone with him in the apartment. We just don't know. But whatever happened at that time, he obviously progressed to sexual assault and murder.
And I think, just from a clue standpoint, is there anything that was found at the murder scene, her apartment? Is there anything you found belonging to the perpetrator? Is there any marks on her from fighting back? What clues do you have?
Obviously, we were able to recover his DNA profile, which is our biggest clue. But other than that, there wasn't really anything left that provided us any evidentiary value.
Do you know how old he is? Do you know how old roughly? Do we have
We don't know. I mean, she gave us a rough age, late 20s, early 30s at the time in 97.
So now he would be what, in his 40s potentially, right?
Absolutely. But I mean, that's a rough guess, right? I mean, he could have been anything from teens to 40s. We don't know. This was her while she was being sexually assaulted. This is her observations of this person.
And I guess, the possibility that DNA evidence that was collected from Sandra may have matched DNA from another rape victim from 97. Is that concerning that this could be a repeat offender? Do you feel that there may have been other women that did not come forward? Or could this person be picking up where they left off in another country even? Because the one thing I've learned about, obviously you're the head of the homicide squad, and I deal with a lot of, Toronto police, FBI. And one thing that I notice about a lot of these individuals is they don't stop at 2.
Yeah. I mean, that's a concern to us as well. Right. But unfortunately at this time, with all the sexual assaults and all the homicides that we've resubmitted evidence for, we haven't had any other cases that match forensically. So we can't say unequivocally that there's more. Could there be? As you said, could there be other sexual or sex workers that were assaulted by this male and allowed to live and they never complained? Absolutely, yeah. There could. Could there be others where he didn't leave his DNA behind? Absolutely, there could. It's all things that we take into account and look at and see what we can do with it. I mean, we have the VI-class method through the Ontario Provincial Police. So if we have anything that has similar MOs, we usually get notified, and then we'll look into that as well. We have our serial predator, serial offenders the Predator
Yeah.
investigations. We look at all those. We match up everything that we possibly can through Ontario, through Canada. If this person has moved to another jurisdiction or another country, we've tried to send the DNA through, so there's no DNA from other countries. Could there be other victims anywhere? It's always a possibility, but at this point, we don't have anything to forensically say that yes, that there is other victims.
And with Cassandra, was she sexually assaulted?
She was, yes.
She was.
Yes.
And I think, in terms of, other murder victims in this fashion, there's obviously other women in this country that have been strangled to death and murdered, especially in this profession. And it makes you wonder, is this person maybe just hadn't left their DNA on others? Maybe you never know. And it's got to be something that, is obviously something that we want to try and catch this individual. If they're still out there, what's your gut on this individual?
I'm kind of torn. I'm not sure if maybe he left the country or he had a job at the time. I mean, if he was carrying handcuffs, was he a security officer? Was he in law enforcement? Did he work as a bouncer at a club? These are things that we don't know, but maybe his profession progressed. Maybe he got married, had some kids. We don't know these things. But for whatever reason, he has not came back up onto our radar. Maybe he's deceased. Yeah. Maybe something happened. Maybe he was living a high risk lifestyle and something else happened in between. We don't know. But unfortunately, we have not had his DNA that we're able to match up in these cases.
In terms of the general public on this case, I mean, anybody living in the area between, I guess, even if we're including the other case, 97 to 2003, let us know anything that you would want from the general public.
We worked with the Sex Trade Workers Alliance on this. We went through all the bad date books. Anybody that any of the sex trade workers had provided, whether it was licenses, phone numbers, names. We went through all of that to see if we could match this up. We've collected a lot of DNA in this case as well, and nothing has come back. So if anybody knows or anybody thinks that they know who this person is, just provide us a name. Again, in these cases where we have DNA, we'll do the work on it. We just need a name. We just need someone that we can go and get their DNA and match it up to the crime scene. So all we need is a name.
It's amazing how, far technology has come. And I think what a lot of people forget about these cold cases, you guys are working overtime and you go above and beyond trying to bring closure for these families and these cases. But the technology just wasn't there back when a lot of these cold cases happened. And people forget that there wasn't the level of DNA. There wasn't, the big one is the video too. There wasn't as much video. What's some of the difficulties you guys have? Because I think that's important to talk about here. What are some of the main, the main difficulties that you guys have in terms of, solving these?
Well, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, right? In today's date, we have video, we have cell phones, everybody has cameras, right? Whether they're small cameras, whether they're nanny cams, whether they're full-blown surveillance systems. Every phone number that comes in on your cell phone, it's tracked. There's cameras in the areas. Everywhere you go, you're on someone's camera, whether it's someone has a camera over their garage or whether it's an apartment that has cameras or the store down the street or McDonald's. Everybody has cameras. So if you're in the area and we're able to do a canvas, we'll find you somewhere on camera. Back at the time, that wasn't as prevalent. So we don't have that. But what we do have is people now are aware of DNA. They're aware that they're being tracked. They're aware that there's DNA. They aren't leaving their DNA. The one good thing that we have from these cold cases that gives us a leg up is people weren't conscious of DNA actually being an investigative tool at the time. So they left their DNA without any worry of the fact that I may be caught because I left my DNA at the scene, which the advances in science that we've come through now, we can profile with DNA from the head of a pin. We have tiny amounts. Every 6 months, DNA is improving. We're coming up with different methods to utilize this DNA. So what they left 20, 30, 40 years ago is now coming back to haunt them because of the advances in science. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. There's both at the old times and in the new times, there's investigative techniques that we're able to use that help us solve these cases.
And have you 100%? I mean, have you with this particular case with Cassandra? Have you spoke with her family? Tell me a little bit about her family, your friends. Who have you been in contact with about this specific case?
Yeah, we've spoken with her brothers, and they're obviously they want this solved. I mean, they're still wondering like what happened. Cassandra was very loving with her family. She was helping them out. She was providing money to people. She was just a good person, just a good-hearted person. And by all means, she was making a lot of money doing what she was doing. And she was using that to help her family.
Yeah, it's really, really a sad situation. And I think that, anything that our show here can do to help bring these individuals forward, the family deserves it. Cassandra deserves it. And, I think that if anybody has any information, they call Crime Stoppers. They can call you guys at the Homicide Division. They can even reach out with a name to Obie Ax if they'd like to stay completely anonymous as well. So it's endless. Is there anything else that you would ask of the public?
No, I agree with you 100%. Any way that they can get the information to us, we don't care how it comes through. We don't need to know who you are providing the information. We just need that name. So any way that you want to do it, any way that you feel good about doing it, please feel free. Just give us that name and we'll solve these cases.
Well, thanks very much for joining us today, Steve. Please, once again, if you can bring any closure to the families, in these cold cases, we beg you to please call the Homicide Squad, Crime Stoppers, and even here at Obie Ax, feel free to just leave a name. Thanks for being with us, Steve, and have a good day, everyone.